Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lifeburst podcast. This is a special interview edition of the Lifeburst podcast because I am joined with Mahou Shoujo Autumn.
Hi. And okay,
Hello.
before we start, can I just say, as a millennial, it is a dream come true to be on a podcast.
Ah, that's funny. Yeah, I do kind of feel like, not to like shame us in the podcast world, I do kind of feel like Let's Start a Podcast is like the 80s equivalent of like Let's Start a Band.
Oh no, absolutely. Like I am talking right now into the classic Blue Yeti mic, which my partner and I bought several years ago because we were like, let's do our own podcast.
Oh, I love it. Okay, that's so exciting. Well, we are so happy to have you here. I'm actually so excited to have you here, like
hmm
on not in person, but in voice person, if that makes sense.
In the
Because
virtual space.
in the virtual space, yeah, a little bit more voice to voice, if you will. Because Autumn, you started out as a fellow selector on this channel. That's how we met, is I kept reading your comments.
Yeah, and I certainly have a lot of opinions, and I always appreciate you guys responding to my
Oh my
opinion.
goodness. No, we totally appreciate the comments that fellow selectors leave, such as yourself, because you guys are way smarter than us sometimes. So so we really appreciate all the feedback and discussion because we cross as a community.
Absolutely. It's probably one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm just so excited whenever I get to talk about it, to contribute to kind of the space and culture that we have going on. I've gotten multiple people to play Wixoss, and I'm constantly recruiting new people just because, I feel like it's such a fun game and I want more people to experience it.
Yay, we love
Yay!
to see it. So on that note, how did you originally get into WeCross?
Yeah, how did I get into Wheatgrass? This is actually pretty funny, but
Hmm.
I started playing Magic, I think 4 or 5 years ago. I had heard about Magic very late, like the senior year of high school,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Anyways, and I did not get back to it until around M20, around War of the Spark, and I was playing for a
Hmm.
little bit, and I was like, I'm not enjoying this so much. But I know that I love card games. What other card games are there? I was just shopping around for other card games, like I got semi decently into Flesh and Blood, but at that
Oh.
same time, I was watching a Flesh and Blood channel, and he mentioned WeCross. And not only did he mention WeCross, he mentioned a Niji Sanji collab.
Oh, the
Um,
VTubers gotcha.
YouTubers got me. Their collaboration did work. I saw Anji. I was like, I gotta have Chibi Anji. How do I get Chibi Anji? And I bought, the starter deck for Niji Sanji. I have never opened it because by the time it actually arrived, I was like, I want to try playing Lion. I started playing
Uh-oh.
an Arquin. I started playing PRJs, and I was like, yeah, you don't get the card. And that was my ascent into Ecross, I guess.
Nice. So the marketing really worked on you, huh?
Absolutely.
It worked on us too.
I'm pretty excited for the Sanji reprint set that's coming out in Japan.
Yes, I did hear that that was going to be coming out. Actually, we recently just played one of our local WeCross friends, and he had built a new Ninja Sanji deck,
Mhm.
and it like kind of kicked my butt. It was pretty good.
That's something I really love about Wheatcross so far is that, everything feels so relevant and like, yeah, you can try and make it work no matter when it came out, like there's decks running
Hmm.
around running Heras that came out, set zero, I think, and it hasn't been power crept yet, the way the game has been growing is so fun.
I totally agree. Yeah, I've been on board since set zero. Ancient surprise for life.
Surprise. I loved your episode about actually the Lovecraft lore. I was like, that is so cool. I did not know that.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I might have to do an update to that video because like
Halloween.
since the new set came out. Anyways, so let's get into how you've been playing Wecross because I've been seeing your name pop up in a lot of ceremonies, and you actually placed significantly better than I did in the last ceremony. What were you playing?
Yeah, going through kind of my results in the past, I've always kind of hovered around, I think somewhere between 32 to 60. I did managed to get second place in the second PO3 ceremony, and I was hot off the heels of that. I was like, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
spike this. I'm gonna figure out how to play X. Um,
Ooh, I gotcha.
who I love from the anime. I have watched the Diva anime. I don't necessarily recommend it to a lot of people, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I just love, what the kids call it, gaslight gatekeep girl boss behavior. Um,
Oh my God.
just like there's
Um,
a scene in the
I don't
anime
think I've
where
ever heard
um,
that phrasing before.
really okay, it's a Gen Z thing. I hang out with kids probably. But there's a scene in the anime where X goes out and gets Hirata, lies to her about like a friend in the hospital to help her find like takoyaki.
Mm.
And I was just like, yeah, I love this girl. I'm gonna play her as my main. Tons of
Oh, I
love.
see. So you connected with the character in the anime, so you decided to translate that into your gameplay.
I would absolutely lie to a high schooler to help me find a trendy dessert. I would definitely
Oh my
um
God. Ladies and gentlemen, and ethereal friends, the truth has come out. Autumn will lie to you to get desserts.
but
I
yeah,
love it.
I was trying to figure out how to run X, and contrary to I think how a lot of other people play, I am not at all a fan of Enderburn. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I find it a little too awkward. I feel like I never burn quite as much. The different signies feel a little parasitic to each other. And so the night before the ceremony, I basically ripped out the entire Enderburn package. I shoved in a bunch of level ones, good life first, and made kind of a recursion package with Muramasa instead. Because I felt like the problem I was having was actually with deck velocity and getting through to see enough of my deck, holding enough cards in hand, and getting to have like, that critical Nobunaga on the turn when I wanted it.
Interesting. So you just use the phrase deck velocity. Can you
Mhm.
expand on that?
Yeah, so this is kind of like I think my magic background coming through, but deck
Come
velocity is
through.
basically how fast you're able to kind of churn through your deck. And in a
Hmm.
deck like DXM, which has access to black, and cards like Thieves Recovery, Trigger of Victory, pulling one back into hand. If you're running Death Deck,
Hmm.
that salvage two of the center color back to hand. Um, you basically get to use your, trash as a second hand and pull back whatever you need.
That
Um,
is a great way to think about that, for
and
sure.
I basically, double down on the strategy by putting in Muramasa's, which is a level 3 Demon Signy, which has the life burst. Uh, when you flip it in your cloth, you get to get two cards back from your trash and then
Hmm.
discard a card. Um,
Interesting. So you were using your life cloth for even more recursion at you additionally built that into your deck, so almost everything was centered around maximizing playing from your trash. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There would be games, when
Interesting.
I would just play two Baphomets turn one, mill over, two servants, which usually
Mm-hmm.
is not good. But if I could just hit a Muramasa in the Lifeburst, right, I would get back two servants, discard, some thing I didn't need anymore. I was running Cetas in the deck. I was running 20 level one.
Mm.
And so I have plenty of fodder to pitch.
Wait. Hold on,
Yeah.
back up. You were running 20 level ones?
I kept bricking during practice, and I said, I don't want to brick anymore, and I put in 20 level ones.
Oh my God.
Um,
That is a lot. That is a
it was
very sharp curve. So what did you do for your level, not to interrupt you, but what did you do for your level twos and threes if half your deck was level ones?
Yeah, it was very limited. I was very reliant on Deus Recovery finding me the Lancelot and letting me reuse the Lancelot. Um,
Hmm.
but basically, I believe it was a package of four Lancelots, uh, two Globeas, which the pitch from hand also fed into the trash as a second hand since I was pitching it, but I could get it back at any time if I needed it, and two Volcanics from the starter deck. Um,
Volcanic is very nice, for sure. We
the
have
pitch.
a bulky level two vanilla with a great life burst. We love
It
it.
was really surprising how often I would just slam a 10K and my opponent would be like, I guess I have to assassin through this now. Um,
Interesting.
and
So it still would stay on the field.
I
That's
feel like this is
annoying.
really interesting, but I know a lot of people talk about how X can go through anything, so it's like kind of useless to try and wall up against her, but I've always felt like you can only assassin so many times. And at a certain point,
Mhm.
X starts to run out of options. And with the Muramasa package, the other thing that she does is that when she attacks, you can pay a black, you can trash a Signy on your field, and uh, get back any Signy from your trash, including guards. Um,
Hmm.
So what I would often end up
Okay.
doing is like, situating the board in such a way where my opponent wouldn't want to remove Muramasa or we're shielding instead. And I will be able to use the Muramasa effect to open a lane to get back a guard, which was great because I was going to shield next turn anyways.
Hmm.
Um, and be able to survive, that full next turn to go on for another four attacks, five attacks, maybe with like a double crush in there. And that would often guarantee me a game close.
That is so interesting. I find this take on X extremely fascinating because it's so unlike some of the other builds that we've seen people make with an X center deck, even in the Dream teams. So for your build, you were kind of maximizing more on your black with like a splash of red and doing like heavy trash recursion and then finding that burn to help you open up lanes, but not necessarily using your assassin abilities. Is that correct?
hmm And because I had so much recursion and because I was running 20 level ones, sometimes I would get a hand, right? And it would be like Quilibre, Sita, Servant, and then two level
Hmm.
threes, right?
Hmm.
And usually if I was thinking, a standard deck, I would probably hold on to those level ones with life first, just so that I have like them to play in first turn. It feels
Hmm.
reliable, it feels comfortable.
Or
I would
something to get caught up in your life cloth.
I would mulligan so aggressive. I would hold the servant and pitch both level ones back into the deck and hope I would draw because half my deck was level ones. There was no chance that wasn't, right? Um,
Right.
And because, I was running DS recovery, I would be able to, hopefully mill over two. Maybe I would be able to find a red and a black level one. It was very risky, but at a certain point, I was doing pretty well at locals, very much because I was hitting 5 to 6 life bursts every game. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I was mulliganing so aggressively for them, and I think it's a really interesting way, in my opinion, to kind of try and build a deck, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's so many things that are so reliable about Wheatcross, even in Diva format, with the 40 cards, with the draw two every turn, that by making the trash a second hand while already drawing two, I was seeing so much of my deck. Um, and by being able to rely a little bit on my life bursts, because I was kind of forcing the percentages up in a way,
Mm-hmm.
um, the deck would almost kind of just like pilot itself. Like there were moments, when I would have to find the line, I would have to be like, okay, in this scenario, I think I want a Phalaris because a Phalaris is
Mm-hmm.
going to mill my opponent to a point where, I can death deck them, and that's basically an open lane that they have to respond to. If they don't, I get like free value off of the death deck refresh. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, right? Phalaris herself just exists as a threat. I don't have to put resources into her. So I can go to turn four, I can go to turn
Ah.
five, holding up, like the X level two soul, holding up the assassin ability, and I won't run out of gas before my opponent does.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting way to kind of balance everything out then is almost, I mean, you said that you were using Phalaris more as a field threat than necessarily maximizing on her abilities. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, and it
So
became
using
like
her for her like raw power.
scenario where if my opponent would respect the Polaris, I would, say, okay, I'm going to just exceed the death deck. I don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I still have trigger. But if they, would respect it, then but if they didn't respect it, I would mill them over 10 and I would have such a good shot at refreshing them the turn after. Um, that I could, maybe, for example, instead exclude the trigger and deny them enough enter that they couldn't respond. Um, and that was the kind of fun dynamic that I had, right? Where very early on, one of the reasons that I gave up on the enter burn was because my opponents uh, I play a lot at Turn Zero Games, which has had also a lot of really great ceremony placements, but they would hold their Xenoclusters for so long that I was like, I can't actually burn them because burning them here would allow them to Xeno in such a way that gives them extra enter for a response. And I just
Interesting.
dropped it entirely to make that kind of sideboard useless and play around anticipating that they would have a useless piece that they would need to somehow exclude or uh in a lot of cases just draw one or enter charge one separately.
Oh, I see. So that's why you just forgoed it because you were like, well, there's because there's so much Xenocluster in your local meta, you just decided, I'm just gonna do my own thing with this deck, and it ended up working out really well for you.
Yeah, I
That's so
joke a lot
fascinating.
that
I love this.
Xenocluster is a coward's piece because
Oh!
I often find myself playing my turns out, just counting 7, 8 enter, thinking to myself, okay, I know that the maximum that my opponent can burn me next turn is 3. That leaves me with, like 4 enter. That's enough for shield plus smash. And if I can keep a card in hand that's a servant, then I can live. Like making that kind of math and restraining my aggro, like my aggression,
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that I don't like lose immediately. Um,
Mm-hmm.
was a big breakthrough for me. And also just
Aggro
sometimes
learning self-control. We love to see it.
absolutely. And just sometimes, like, okay, there's a chance I die here, but if I hit a life first, I live. and taking that chance and not being afraid to, kind of die on the heels of that decision because I know if I respond, I'm dead anyways.
Right.
Um, that too was like a big moment for me because I think, I've always loved games. I've always loved playing things like chess. I'm Korean, and a Korean version of chess is Changi, and I would play it with my dad all the time. And he would
Mm-hmm.
always critique me for being too defensive and just figuring out a way to make this defense offensive and holding back when I need to, but striking forward when I want to. Um, it's been one of my favorite aspects of growing as a selector for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, I love how other card games can really inform our decisions about the card game that we're focusing on right now. So you mentioned that you have influences from Magic the Gathering, and then what was the name of the Korean version of chess?
Changi, yeah.
Changi.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a really interesting game because you actually start out with a lot more limited pieces, and the game is actually more about assembling these kind of almost combo board states where you can basically, put the general in checkmate. Um, but it's so focused around these particular arrangements uh,
Mm-hmm.
rather than necessarily algorithms that Western chess that I found interacts with. Um, that's been really interesting for me in Wheatcross just because the limited number of pieces feels very similar to the limited number of pieces that you get in Wheatcross with like 3 lanes and like trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what is the most awkward scenario I can give to my opponent. Um,
Yes, the catch 22. We were just talking about that on our last podcast, how important that is to be able to force and implement that onto your opponent.
Absolutely. Like I was playtesting with a another selector who has been on the podcast, Ray. He's the one
Ooh,
that built
shouts
the
out.
Akino deck a couple sets ago. But I was playtesting against him, and there was a scenario where I was like, I keep drawing level threes, I don't know what to do. And turned out the answer was to just slam 2 Diabrides on field,
Hmm.
and leave a lane open because I was only going to open 1 lane anyways. And just make that awkward board state for my opponent where I could hopefully burn them to 0 and maybe strike back with Nobunaga Double Crush next turn.
So I
Um,
have oh, go ahead.
Nobunaga, by the way, my favorite card by far by mechanic. I love Double Crush so much.
Yes, being able to pay for a double crash and like going straight into swinging is such a threat. Such a threat, even when
Absolutely.
you don't pay for it, because isn't it that it's not on enter? Like you could do that at any time?
It's
Or that is on
absolutely,
enter?
yeah, it's an action.
It's an
So the
action.
next turn you can
Eee.
activate it again, and so it just kind of sits there as a threat. And I hadn't really thought about this until, Deus came along with Deus Adams and H2O, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so annoying that blue keeps getting these recurring threats that they can just, like open a lane every turn.
Yeah, and
And
slap on the field and see what the opponent does.
yeah, wait a minute, Nobunaga can do that.
And it's similar to how you were using your Phalaris as well, seeing
Yeah.
what the opponent chooses to do when you place down a threat on the board, and then responding after that decision has been made.
I think at a certain point, it's like I can think about all the possible responses my opponent can have.
Hmm.
And I can try to play around it. But at the end of the day, I can't read their mind. And sometimes the best thing to
Try as
do
we
is to
might.
provide them, yeah, a board state that I don't know how I would deal with. Let's see if you can figure it out.
Here is a problem, solve it for me.
Yeah,
I
and
really
sometimes,
love that.
I take that experience and I apply it, in the future, right? It's like, oh, I did this against, X player and he did this and it worked out. Let me see if I can do it. And, you know, I
Mm.
I think that's one of the things I love about card games is that kind of interactive situation where there's often very different board states game after game, but also something similar ones.
Oh. No, I actually really like that idea about um, how you're learning from your previous matches in the
Hmm.
card games, because that's so important. You know, my method is taking notes, but your method is actually holding up a mirror to your opponent and then watching what how they would respond in a situation you've given them to help you inform your decisions in the next game. I imagine that worked out very well for you in a situation like the ceremony where you have like 7 back-to-back matches.
Yeah, still today, right? I'm like, I don't know what to do if my opponent just drops a Nobunaga double crush on me with
Mm-hmm.
the assist that I have. Um, but having done that in a number of matches so far, I think I have a little bit of a better idea about how to, kind of work against it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there have been games where somebody's tried to respond fully with Smash Plus Shield. There have been games where somebody just happened to be running bind.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been games where one game where my opponent s- just did shield for the regular cause to prevent himself from milling out, which was what I was trying to bait him into doing, so as to
Oh.
turn off his own death deck. And because he didn't take that bait, he was able to, withstand the damage. And then next turn, because I had spent all my Ener on Nobunaga,
Right.
strike back with his own Nobunaga with death deck in such a way that I couldn't respond, and I lost
Oh
that game.
no. Oh my
Um,
goodness, that sounds brutal. But that, whoa, I didn't even think of that.
It was
Some
such a
like,
cool line. I respected it so much. It
mm-hmm,
was Maddie, who you also remember from the results of the second PO3 results. I think
mm-hmm.
that's one of the coolest responses one of my opponents has ever had, and it's one that I've been thinking it over constantly, right? Like, why did that work? Could I use that? Like, is that like a smart thing to do? And
Yeah.
no, absolutely. There are so many people who are good at this game, and it's just like, why not learn from them?
Of course. And that's what all the selectors are doing on today's podcast is they're learning from you. I've already learned a lot actually.
I'm excited.
I have one more question about the X deck that we're talking about right now. So you have there's obviously a very big focus on trash recursion and also threatening to mill out your opponent. But because you're putting so many of your cards in your own trash, has refresh been an issue for you, or how have you avoided that?
Absolutely. So this is one of the funny things that I realized that got me to start using this recursion package in the first place was I would refresh anyways. Um, I mean, we talk about shield being kind of a delayed damage with the refresh that it ends up triggering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that I found was that even in these kind of like inner burn only games with the mono red package, I would still mill out on the critical turn and not have enough cloth to like survive a turn after. So I have to, like kill them that turn, but milling out means I have basically nothing in trash, so I can't get anything back with like trigger of victory. And so the way I figured was if I'm going to get milled out anyways, I might as well make the in-between turns and the turn after really productive. So being able to kind of load up on my graveyard enough that if I want to trigger early, I'm triggering and getting something back that's actually useful. And if I am having to Day of Shield, after I Day of Shield, milling enough into the trash that I have something useful to get back. Um,
Mm-hmm.
of course, that does definitely rely on like your opponent maybe not recognizing, oh, if I swing with my lyric here, I'm going to mill over 5 extra, and that's just more again, velocity. That's my opponent getting to see more cards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like, yeah, it's the perfect play to not swing your lyric. But sometimes opponents don't play perfectly, and getting a little bit of percentage advantage on that has also been very valuable. And also, even if they don't, you do still possibly trash that last life cloth. You do possibly still find something in trash that you can maybe get back or use in some way. There have been games where I've ended up refreshing with shield, but milled over enough still with Day Shield that I was able to death deck the following turn,
Mm-hmm.
which was very cool. Um, and my opponent had to do that because it was shield for the three lyrics, Signy swings, and needed to maybe try and push for whether or not I had a servant in hand with the lyric, and I did.
All
But yeah,
right.
just figuring, hey, I'm gonna do this anyways, might as well use it to my advantage was the thing that I figured.
All right. I love all that reasoning. Honestly, this sounds like a really solid theory to build a deck on, and it's obviously been working out very well for you. So, on that note, is this the deck that you took to the selector circuit?
This is the deck I took to the selector circuit, and I think it did relatively well. I will say
I
the one
think it
thing
did
did.
too, based off of your placement.
Sometimes when the deck does not run, it does not run. Um, there is one nightmare scenario, which is, where I get no Baphomets in hand, I can't find my servants, and where are they? They're all in my life cloth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I try to use, stuff like land slots to spend them to get them into trash, but sometimes you don't flip that life first, or it's at the wrong
Mm-hmm.
time. But my opponent Psycho also played very well, capitalizing on whenever I didn't have a servant or didn't have the cards I needed. And I got second place. Very exciting.
Yes, you did. That's so
So
exciting. I know that there were a lot of matchups for the selector circuit. And honestly, I'm like so proud that you got second place. Like I was like, yes. I was watching the whole thing.
yeah, at right after I realized I got second, I was like, oh my gosh, do I get to pick second? I hope I get to pick Tiffany. I wanna like
Oh
hang
my
out with her
god.
like
Stop.
in the creator circuit, which we did. I believe you were playing Machina and I was
Yes.
trying to run a early version of the Dash Harana with no limit that
Oh no,
ended
I
very
think I was playing Deus actually.
oh really
Yeah,
good.
that's the one I was running. Because
Um
I knew I think if I remember correctly, the way that we had picked our centers, it was like randomized.
hmm,
And I got Deus, which makes me
yeah,
very happy because that's my favorite center out of that team.
really.
So all of the create, yeah, I wasn't kind of in the similar way that you were. I wasn't really a big fan of X's kind of, in my opinion, awkward Enderburn sort of aggro like vibe that it had going on. And then Machino, I just really didn't connect with the deck. But with Deus, it's a little bit more, it's like somewhere between like mid-range and aggro, which I vibe very well with. So I found that deck to be the most comfortable one to work with out of the options for that team.
Absolutely. And I am pretty sure we're gonna see a lot of Deus in this coming up ceremony.
Oh, I think so too. Because I think that a lot of people realize that Deus is probably one of the more uh, stable centers, whereas as you kind of explained before, like X and Machina uh, could do with better consistency in their like native builds, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Just getting to exclude your piece to get three any kind of like Signy bag. I think it's
Hmm.
a card, right? And the souls
Hmm.
being such reliable avenues for damage is just really cool. I really like her design, but I honestly I don't know what it is. I can't seem to play her. I watch like my friends that turn zero play her all the time, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on.
Playing
Why?
Deus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
everybody thinks she's really smug because of all the expressions that she has on the cards, and honestly, I don't think they're wrong. She kind of reminds me of um if anybody out there also remembers the Twitter period of like Smug Wendy, like from Wendy's, like the fast food company, and she was
yeah.
very snarky. That attitude is kind of what shows through on the card art for me.
Mhm.
I don't know,
I
maybe I
no,
vibe with that too. I don't know.
I feel like I don't know. It's so funny how much characterization some of the DXM characters get compared to some of the others.
Mhm.
They're they have such a strong personality to me. I know some people don't love the North American comic book version arts that came in the
Mm.
PO4 box topper. I
Mhm.
kind of love them. I love how aggressive all of DXM was. It's just
They
so
they
funny
do
to
seem
me.
very aggressive, very intimidating.
Yeah.
So circling back to your tournament arc
Mhm.
for the selector circuit, were there any standout matches that you kind of want to give us a little play-by-play of?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's been a little bit.
It
The
has been
selector
a
circuit was like a couple weeks long.
it was very long. I'm actually having a hard time remembering, just because it was such a long time ago.
Hmm.
Uh, gosh.
If you can't think of any like standout matches right away, could I
Mhm.
ask what you thought were the more challenging matchups for your unique X Center build? What were some of the like cards or rigs you had particular trouble navigating around?
Mm. I actually think this is really interesting to me. I think two things, right? I think number one, I was a little nervous about mono white builds that I might encounter because I have gotten my butt kicked by that deck so many times.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Mike, who got second last ceremony, is actually kind of a semi-local of ours.
Hmm.
And I've gotten to play against that deck from the very beginning,
Hmm.
when he
The
was looking
mono white.
for a copy of White Heaven just to jam at that locals event.
Hmm.
Um, it is so wild. And when Lion actually crushes a live cloth, which he has done against me before, it is backbreaking in the weirdest way. Um,
Yes.
anyways, yeah, I was so worried about it just because, those white walls, they're so hard to get over.
Hmm.
Especially now, but even back then, without hitting like certain life bursts or, needing to manage my enter just that much more efficiently, and maybe having to, exclude my piece early or trying to figure out a way to bait out like a response before I can do anything. Because, with those targeted removal assist responses, right? You can't exactly Nobunaga at any time until they're out. Um,
Yes. Yeah, actually, I mean, we spoke a lot about placing a threat on the field and seeing what your opponent does. Having a level one assist on the field in the very late game, like past turn three, is a huge threat to me. Because I'm like, that could grow into anything, and most likely it's going to stop me from winning this turn. So
right.
you almost have to find a way to outlast those situations, or again, like you were saying earlier, try and force your opponent into either a catch 22 or a response that maybe they would have wanted to do later, just so that you can establish where that threat is in terms of like, is it when are they supposed to be playing this so that you can properly play around it.
Right, and just, I think there were a lot of games when I was going up against like many Hirana mirrors where I could be like, okay, I can go down on enter here because I know I'm going to get it back, but you don't versus mono white. You have the enter that you do, and you just live with that, you know?
And you live with it.
Um, you're not getting any extra enter. Don't spend it all in one place. Go buy yourself something nice. Yeah,
Do not treat yourself. Don't. Have a
uh,
budget, an enter budget. Did you no,
absolutely.
so
Mhm.
with mono white decks, there tends to be a lot of bouncing from the field back to the opponent's hand. Did you find that to be difficult to address because you had like 20 level ones in your deck? Did you find it difficult to fill out your field or put out those heavy defenses in the late game?
Oh, it was so weird. Just because, my deck was built around recursion, the advantage that my deck often had over other decks was that card advantage, that card selection,
Hmm.
having more cards in my hand at a given point, um, and being able to choose the right answers at any point. But against
Hmm.
mono white, where I was constantly getting things bounced back to hand, it just became super redundant. I had the answer in hand. I had to just replay it. Or like a Signy that I played turns previously was just super outdated, and it was just stuck in my hand, not really doing anything.
Hmm.
Um, and I had a couple outlets like the Globea Lifeburst, but you know, besides that, it wasn't doing anything, and it was so interesting to get that advantage that my deck was built towards, having it totally nullified,
Hmm.
and, trying to play around that. At this point, I've tried modifying the deck, in preparation for Ceremony. I'm personally anticipating a little bit of mono white to be running around, and
I
trying
think
to
so as
figure out
well.
how to play against it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you're going to be
Um
playing in the ceremony that's happening October 29th?
Absolutely, I'm super excited.
I,
Um,
I can't wait to see how you do. I'm always excited.
and I'm excited to see how well you guys do. That's one of the first things I definitely look for is like, how did I do? How did my friends
Where is
do?
everyone's
How did life
placements? Yeah,
do?
we're always looking for familiar names on the roster.
Um, yeah, and it's so interesting because it's like when I'm so strong against discard and having that recursion package, I'm weaker against mono white, but in
Hmm.
bolstering myself against mono white and, cutting down maybe on some of the recursion package, I open myself a bit more up to discard. And it's this like awkward push and pull between like two meta predictions that I'm worried about and trying to figure out
Hmm.
which one might be more prevalent, which one am I more worried about. Um,
Well,
that actually I do find really interesting.
it seems like discard might not be the worst thing for you because you're like you said earlier, you're playing your trash as a second hand or almost like an open hand, a
Mhm.
big old stack of open hand.
So
So I don't know that discard might be such a threat to you outside of making it more and more difficult for you to refill your field and having to spend more resources earlier to get things back from your trash.
yeah. Um,
However, with bouncing things off of your field, especially since you had mentioned that X doesn't tend to open like a lot of lanes at once, so the bouncing I feel like is almost a bigger threat. But have you play tested against heavy discard decks in your locals to see how that would go?
yeah, so that's the one thing I'm worried about right now. I've played against discard last set, actually a lot of discard, specifically Tamago. And I found that I was able to, get by it with all the recursion that I was having, and paring down a little bit. I'm a little nervous, but I'm hoping that I'm still flexible enough with, just cards like Trigger of Victory. I can fill three on a given turn, guaranteed. And also just kind of embracing like, yeah, I'm in it for the awkward board state. It doesn't matter if I have two level threes in hand, as long as they're the right level three, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to embrace the chaos a little bit. Because
Embrace the chaos.
um,
I feel like we're getting so many catchphrases out of this interview. You know, we're getting not only like hot takes and raw honesty, but we're in it for the awkward. We're embracing the chaos of this Recursion X deck. I love it.
I
I
could
love the vibes of this podcast. I hope you fellow selectors listening right now are enjoying it as well. If you are, please subscribe.
I think I could probably fill like an off-brand pottery barn of like Wecross related catchphrases. Um, I don't know. I think it's just really fun too, right? Just like here's my slogan. I'm gonna put it out there. I Even if they contradict sometimes, sometimes I would
Yeah,
say like I'm not afraid of losing. I'm just in it to win. But I
I'm just
also
in
just
it
said
to win.
previously, I just need to not lose one turn and then I can win. So it's just kind of like
It's
um
not that I
I
have to
don't
win,
know.
it's just I have to not lose.
Well, and this is like also kind of like a fun little inspiration from Chinese chess that I
Inspire
got,
me, please.
which is xiangqi,
Mhm.
where a lot of the manuals and books often have like these frequently forward proverbs, and I just
Mhm.
find that so fun and so just enjoyable. It's like um trying to think through like what do I do here? What is my risk here? And it's just like
Mhm.
if I don't
Well
lose
then,
here, I can win. Or like I'm afraid that I'm going to like lose on this turn, and it's just like I don't have to worry about losing. I just have to worry about winning. And it's like, yeah, I feel a little more confident because I've
I
always just
kind of
been,
like that though. Yeah,
yeah,
that like really quiets down the like defeatist attitude in us that want to be more competitive or have some sort of competitive anxiety. You don't have to worry about losing, you have to worry about winning. I like that.
yeah.
Huh.
And as a kid, I had terrible competitive anxiety all the time, and
Mhm.
one of the reasons I picked up card games as an adult was number one to make friends, but number two.
Done.
I
Check.
really wanted to try and get over my anxieties about
Mhm.
competition, and um, I'm really happy to say that I'm getting there little by little, and it's these sayings and proverbs that I make up for myself that have been really helpful.
I
Um,
love that. Oh my goodness. Inspiring. I'm so happy that that we're having this interview, Autumn. Honestly, I felt like it was so long overdue.
I'm really excited to be here. I don't know. Whenever a set comes out, one of the first things I look for is your podcast. And sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree, but I feel like it's in that disagreement that I get to learn something about the game. And I'm always excited to figure out what that is.
Well, we certainly appreciate you commenting on all of our videos, and I have greatly enjoyed watching you explore more of the WeCross world and learning from you. And I'm so happy that we got to sit down and have this interview today because you have such a fascinating take on the X deck, and I think a lot of fellow selectors out there will want to try this build. So thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge and good vibes with us today, Autumn.
Thank you for having me. Before we go, I just want to say, if anyone listening is in the LA area, please drop by Turn Zero Games in Koreatown. We have WeCross on Sundays now at 4 p.m. We're always excited to have new players. We got actually, I think, 4 new players this month that I'm really
Ooh,
excited about.
we
Um,
love to see it.
and signing off, may you always flip a life first.
Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe to the Lifeburst podcast. We will see you next time.